strengthen hand balances and perhaps even back bends, there's not many things that help to strengthen the wrists for your students in yoga. So I've found a few things that I think are very beneficial. I'd like to share them with you. I might have gone over a lot of these different wrist stretches and strengtheners in another area in this website, so you might want to check on that a little while too. I'm going to go a little bit more deeply into a couple of those. In our yoga practice, very often we have our hands placed with our fingertips forward and we have weight on them in this direction. Think of downward facing dog or any arm balance. The hands are facing forward like that. So there's a lot of flexion here in the wrist, but not a whole lot of offering to strengthen this whole area of the hand. So in knuckle raises, that's exactly what it's designed to do. So what that looks like is basically the hands are going to be on the floor, and the only thing that's going to raise is the wrists. So the knuckles stay down, the finger pads stay down, and the wrists lift. So this is what it looks like. I teach this with the arms at about a 45-degree angle. That means my weight is back farther, and I don't have a lot of weight on my hands. This is the simplest way for your students to learn, because they don't have to work that hard. Now, what they're going to do is have their elbow creases face one another, and then they lift the wrists up. So just doing that, your students are going to be interested, because what will happen is sometimes they can only lift it up a little bit. Sometimes they can lift it up a lot higher. So I often say you have to actually push your knuckles down into the floor to actually raise your wrists up like this. So that's the first thing they have to do, is just get acclimated to what this feels like to have their wrists lifted up like this. Then, if they can do this easily, the next thing to do is to put more weight on the hands. So what that just means is I shift my weight so that my arm bones are more straight up and down. And now for me to lift up is going to be a little bit more difficult. Okay? So once your students have found the place that is the most difficult for them, what I have them do is 10 times lifting and 10 times lowering. So they'll just be doing and repeating this 10 times. Once your students get acclimated to these knuckle raises, you can add in a depth of complexity and difficulty by asking them to slow down the descent, counting to 3. So what that would look like is I lift up and then I slowly 1, 2, 3 and release my wrists down. Lift up and slowly 1, 2, 3 come on down. Okay? Here's how some of your students will do this, and you'll want to help them to not get into this habit. Sometimes the student thinks that they can go farther forwards, and then what happens is they use their body as the momentum to lift the wrist, and this is how this looks. They're using everything they can to pull those wrists off. Have them back off a little bit so that all the energy is contained right here, and so this is the area that's getting strengthened along the way. Knuckle raises. I put these in during your Surya Namaskar. You're in dog pose, come down onto your knees. My students are very used to these now, and I'll just call out 10 knuckle raises, and they all know what to do. But of course, in the beginning, you have to break it all down just like I showed you so that all your students can understand what it is that they're doing and how to get the most benefit of this for themselves. I guarantee you that they will find new muscles in their wrists and their hands, and they're going to be feeling pretty good about becoming a little bit more powerful to open up anything or to just simply use their hands later, of course, in their arm balances and their back bends. Another way to help your students strengthen and bring more flexibility into their wrists for their back bends particularly is to do this exercise. Remember, in a back bend, when they're coming from the floor up, their hands are behind them and they're trying to get the heel of the hand down to the floor, and that's one of the more difficult places for your students to find it. Very difficult to get the hands completely down on the floor. So to help that, what I have them do is take their hands out forward, turn them place their hands in closer to their knees, and then lean forward. This is the easiest position for the wrist to be, because what you'll see is the flexion here is not that deep. As soon as I start to walk my knees back, I pull my weight back, you're going to see that this angle becomes more acute. In this way, your students are able to work the stretch in any way that feels good for them. So here's a couple of things for you to teach your students while they're creating this nice stretch. To increase this stretch, what they're going to do is actually turn their elbow creases in a little bit while they're in that position. So what that looks like is they have their hands down, pressed down through their finger pads. They get it to the place that feels like a good stretch, but not too much, not too difficult. And then they turn their elbow creases in. Turn them in and hold, and then bring them out. Turn them in and hold, and bring them out. Your students are going to feel a really nice stretch all along their forearms, some places that they may never have felt before. And when they're done, you just ask them to shake out their wrists, and it feels really fantastic. And you can just remind them, we're working these for our back bends later on, or for whatever we need to have our wrists nice and strong and supple.